All right, so because the radiator kept getting plugged up on this thing and the V-twin does not like being hot, generates a ton of heat. So what we decided to do, is get a relocate kit from Lucky 7 Motorsports. So there's the mount basically that you put the radiator in. They give you a new section of hose. And we've also got some fittings here and some hose clamps, some hardware. Now we did have to go to the hardware store and buy some new bolts and nylock nuts to put on here. And we're gonna have to drill some holes in the rack to make it all work. I'm out of breath because I've been taking this thing apart. So we figured out that you take this plastic off the top here, and they've got the reservoir buried way down in there on this machine. So we need to go ahead and just disconnect this thing and get it out of the way so we don't tear it up. So I guess first order of business is going to be to drain the radiator, and then we'll try to actually disconnect the radiator and physically remove it from the front end. We're going to try and do that without taking the plastics off. All right, so first order of business is to take this clamp off. You're going to have some big pliers like this, and you just squeeze it and then you can move that around. And you can obviously see where it was. Now usually when these things have been on for a while, they get kind of adhered to the neck of the radiator. So you can also use this to kind of grab it. You don't want to squeeze real hard and crush that, but you want to squeeze just enough that you can kind of wiggle this and break the suction free on the hose, just like so. And now I got my drain pan down here, and we can go ahead and take this radiator hose off and start draining this puppy out. Make sure I got my pan in the right position. Ooh, there it goes. And it doesn't look like the pan is catching a whole lot of stuff. What a mess. It also looks to me like that coolant is dirty. That looks like some really dirty coolant. And I'll tell you something else that we noticed. Man, that stuff looks like pond water. Good Lord. That's disgusting. Something else that we noticed up here is that in this reservoir here, when we popped the cap on that thing was completely empty. There's no coolant in this at all. So I don't know if they didn't fill it up from the factory or if this is the dealership's responsibility to do that or what, but somebody dropped the ball and did not put any coolant in the reservoir there. I mean, it's labeled right here, the minimum. You know, there's a line here, I'm pretty sure that says minimum level right there, doesn't it? So they usually are about half full. This one had nothing in it. So I guess this is a good thing because we're going to be able to rectify that problem. All right, so we got that one drained out. I did the lower one first on purpose. Kind of go ahead and get hopefully more of the coolant out over here before we do that upper one over there on the other side. But man, this stuff is nasty. Bring that camera over here and take a look at that. That is disgusting. We checked the owner's manual and it said that this is just regular old ethyl glycol antifreeze like we've had for years and years and years. So I don't know why it's that color. All right, you have to look way up in here to see this upper one. I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but this one has a different kind of clip. It's actually got a worm drive clamp on it. So we're gonna have to get a small ratchet with an 8mm socket on this one. Probably don't have space for a screwdriver because of the way it's turned. Not sure if all of them are this way or if they just ran out of the other ones at the factory. I've never seen two different style clips on a radiator before, but we'll have to unscrew this one and pop it off. And then we'll be back in a minute to try and get the radiator out. There you go. So this one here, I thought was an 8mm, but it's not. It's smaller than that. So it must be like a 6 or 7. I don't have a 6 or 7mm wrench. And it turns out I don't have a 6 or 7mm socket either. So I'm trying to use a adjustable wrench, which seems to be working, just albeit very slowly. What a pain. All right, so now that we got the hoses unhooked, we can take these 4 bolts out. They appear to be a 10mm, and They're not very tight either, which is good. So we're going to start with the bottom ones here, and then we'll try to get to the top ones, but just like everything else on this machine, it looks like the top ones are somewhere where you can't get to them, because they're right behind the upper part of that shock tower. That one was easy enough. Let's see if I can get this ratchet in here. Of course not. Oh wait, I think I got it. It's just barely on there, but it did turn a little bit. Can you even see this up in here? It's awfully. All right, that's a little bit better. Now you can see, and I can see also. So you can see the problem here. There's just like no space, but I'm on the bolt and it's turning just barely. There's just no room to work up in here, but it is loose. All right, I think now I might be able to get it. If I can get a finger in here, I might be able to go ahead and loosen that top one up. So anyway, we gotta do this on the bottom and the top on both sides. And we'll be back in just a second after we get these 4 bolts out and see if this radiator will come on out. All right, this is what the bolts look like for the, there we go, for the upper electric fan support. I finally got one of them out, still got to do the other side. And what I had to do was go up under the machine, laying on my back, and hold one hand with a wrench way up in there, because there's a nut, as you can see, on the back side. So you have to be a little bit of a contortionist to get a hand up in there with a wrench. Not easy to do at all. And hold it on that nut while I took my electric ratchet and ran it out real quick from the front. So like I said, not easy, but I got one of them done. Let's see if we can do the other one, and then we'll be ready to disconnect the wiring harness from the fan, which is right there. You can see the wiring harness. So we'll have to disconnect that, and then I think at that point, the bottom of the fan support seems to just have a couple of rubber feet that sit down in the frame. So hopefully the whole thing will tilt forward and then come right out at that point. And that should be the hard part. Once we get the radiator and the fan out, that should be the hard part, I'm hoping. All right, so finally got the fan taken out. The instructions seem to indicate, and from looking at it, I think it's true, that you're gonna have to extend your wiring harness, because remember, we still have to use a hole saw and make holes in these brand new plastics to run the radiator hoses and the wiring for the fan up through. So I cut this, I had to cut away some of the shielding, and then I cut this wire right here, and I'm gonna extend it about 6 or 8 inches with some heat shrink and butt connectors. And then I will also electrical tape it to keep it really mud proof, hopefully. And once we do that part, then we'll be ready to start trying to assemble this thing up on the rack. All right, it's getting kind of dark in here, but I got the extension put on the wiring for the fan. I used heat shrink and electrical tape. Actually, some of those butt connectors were heat shrink butt connectors, so they tightened down, and then I put heat shrink around that and tightened it down, and then I put electrical tape around there. So they should be resistant to water and mud now, at least the best that we can get it. So you notice that there's some rubber feet on the bottom of the fan, and that is going to set down into these provisions on the bottom of this mount that they gave us. And of course we got to get the radiator in here first as well. And you can see these, let me hold this up in the light. You can see those holes there in the top of it. So those original bolts that we took out, or maybe they gave us some hardware. They actually did give us some hardware over there in that package. So we'll use that to put all of this together like a sandwich in this mount. And then it'll be time to start drilling holes on the plastics. But I'm thinking that we're gonna finish some of this up another day. We've been at this for a couple of hours. It's a pretty big project. I think we're about halfway there. He's over there trying to fix some of the fins that got bent out on the trail so that the air can flow through the radiator freely again. So we'll be back maybe another day, shoot some more video of how we're gonna make our holes in the plastic to run our hoses through. And then we're to the point now where we can start assembling this thing. All right, day 2 of this project. So just to recap what we've got done so far, we managed to get the radiator out of the machine, which was not very easy because those 2 upper bolts are pretty tough. We managed to get the fan assembly out of the machine, which was even harder because you can't even see the nuts that are on the back of those bolts to get your hand up in there. He got the plastics off so that we can get to the bleed screws. You can see one of the bleed screws right here. So when we start putting the coolant back in, we'll have to bleed the air out somehow. The instructions that came with this kit keep talking about a radiator cap. This radiator does not have a cap. So we're gonna have to take the hose off, like the upper hose, we're gonna have to actually take it off and sort of use that as a makeshift cap. We'll also take the cap off the reservoir here and we go to fill it back up. We got our holes in the plastics. In retrospect, it probably would have been better to put this hole down here because that's where the lower radiator hose exits, and this hole up here, so it would be a little closer, but I don't know. I just have OCD and I don't like making things all over the place randomly. I like to have a little bit of symmetry there. So now what we got to do is we're going to mount this thing up on the rack, which is going to require us to drill holes. I don't know why they couldn't have designed it so that it would use the existing holes. There's already holes in the rack. They could have very easily designed it to use those. I have no idea why they didn't do that. So we're going to drill some new holes, mount this thing. I also did go ahead and extend the wiring for the fan wiring harness. The instructions said to give yourself 6 to 8 inches. I went ahead and did 12 inches. A little bit too much is better than not enough. So anyway, go ahead and mount it. And then as far as the hoses go, we'll show you this in just a minute, but we're gonna have to run a bunch of 90s to get down into that one. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll get this thing up here, see where we're gonna put it at, get it mounted, and then we'll start hooking our hoses up. So we've been riding, it's a 207, but the fan just came on, so it's gonna go back down. He said it's been running about the same or a little bit cooler actually than it had been before, which makes sense because obviously the radiator's up here now where it can get plenty of fresh air, but everything seems to be going well. We haven't seen any leaks so far, and it hasn't been, getting hot. It's been staying the same or cooler, so everything looks good, and we should be good to go now. Nice little shakedown run here, so I think we're ready to go hit the trails at an off-road park somewhere. Anyway, we're gonna head back to the house now, but appreciate you guys watching, and we'll talk to you later. See ya.